It's great to have everyone here. We're still studying 2 Samuel. Let me begin by talking about, I've been so frustrated in teaching this because it's just, having to be away and everything, and there's a frustration that I have faced, and I hope that it has not frustrated you nearly as much as it has me, because you want to sit down and hear 31 chapters, and we got to cover them. Or no, here 24 chapters, and we've got to cover every one of them, and we've done the best that we could. But side by side with the frustration of the inability to finish the study of 2 Samuel is the joy that we have of answering Macedonian calls. It's just so great. I went 2 Sundays ago, I was with the church in Alabama, and then last Sunday maybe it's 3 Sundays ago, and then the other way around, and then 2 Sundays ago, up in the church in Ohio, and we had a total of 17 people there. And that's good. That's what answering Macedonian calls is all about. There are so many churches of Christ, got 50 members or less, and they're dying. And it's because of COVID. COVID, maybe it's not because of COVID, it's because everybody's getting old and everything. And so it's a matter of trying to go out and do some revival and everything and try to build the church up. And I came away from that congregation in Ohio, and I was really, really pumped. And I'm pumped, and another reason I'm pumped is they've already asked me to come back next year. So they're sitting up there wanting to have some help and everything. Let me just mention about Joy Cantrell. You may not be aware that she is in the hospital now. She's had some troubles with her heart. She's going to have a heart procedure. I don't mean surgery or something like that, but having a procedure on Monday. She's at Palms West Hospital being transferred over to JFK Hospital and everything. And her spirits are great and everything. And it's remarkable. You get to the hospital and you don't have your phone or your phone book. Who are you going to call? Well, it's just amazing. The only phone number she could think of was Mary Reeves. And so we found out about Joy being in the hospital because she called somebody in Jackson, Tennessee, because she had memorized that number. And so make sure you know at least one friend that you can trust, so if you get in that situation. But that's great. Let's get to the lesson. We have 2 more lessons we've got this week and we've got next week. And we're having now to get to that area of picking and choosing what to cover in the rest of 2 Samuel. There's so much that we've left out, and so that's where we are. Just as a matter of review, 1 Samuel could be called the first book of David. Samuel's in it, but Samuel's not in it all that long. After he anoints David, he just sort of fades back into after he anoints David, he fades back into the background, comes back out whenever Saul has failed to kill the Amalekites, and he's in and out of 1 Samuel. But it's really about young David. And it has to do with David as a shepherd boy and David with Goliath. And then the last 2/3 of the book, young David is running for his life from King Saul. I think we got that. We got that picture. So when we get to 2 Samuel, we get to the fact that David is not first king of all of the nation, but he's first king of Judah. That's the southern part. Now the kingdom's not divided into that northern kingdom, Israel, and that southern kingdom, Judah. He's not divided in that way, but there is that division. And so they really want Saul's son to be king, and there's a situation of that. Even some of David's men who'd been great in David's kingdom are on the wrong side in relationship to this. But David becomes king first for 7 years. He's king of that southern kingdom, Judah, and then for 33 years he's king of the entire kingdom. All 12 tribes are followers of David. But David, in those chapters before you get to David and Bathsheba, David is conquering every nation around him. And the boundaries of his kingdom just go outward and outward and outward. And so we talk about the greatness of Solomon's kingdom, and it was great. It was the warrior David. It's the young boy who killed Goliath, young man who killed Goliath, that becomes a great, great warrior. And he becomes a great man in Saul's kingdom. You remember the people singing the song, Saul has killed his thousands, but David his 10,000s. And so you've got that. And so David is becoming a great man. But when you get to chapter 12, you get to David and Bathsheba. And the Lord says, whenever he's committed sin with Bathsheba, I've forgiven you. But he said, but the baby is going to die. I remember, and this to me is a classic lesson that I learned, and I learned it the hard way. I was president of the student body at Freed-Hardeman. I don't know why I guess they were desperate to try to find someone to be president of the student body, and so we had a situation develop where, you remember panty raids? You remember that in the ancient past? You'd go and stand outside the girls' dorm and ask them to throw down their underwear. Well, some guys from Freed-Hardeman went over to a Baptist school and did that very same thing. But on Wednesday night, they came forward and they repented. When the church came together, most all of us went to the same congregation, and they repented. But the school was going to suspend these boys. They were going to suspend them for the rest of the year and may not even allow them back in the next year. Well, the student body got all up in arms about it. I mean, these guys have repented. Doesn't anybody understand anything? So arrogant Dan went into President Dixon, went to his office, said, Brother Dixon, I'm up here, you're down there, I'm standing up. Brother Dixon, I need to talk to you. He said, well, sit down, Dan, let's talk. And I said, God forgave David. And what he did was far worse than what these young men did. And have you not noticed that these guys regret what they've done, and they've gone forward and asked the whole student body to forgive them? I said, it just does not seem right to me to take action against these young men. And I said that more gentle, probably the way that arrogant Dan would have said it to President Dixon. I hope I was humble enough as I was doing that, but I was pretty upset. And he said, well, Jenkins, he says, I do know that story. I do know David, and I know that David repented. He said, Dan, you're leaving out one part. The baby died. You know how humiliating that is? You know how wonderful it is to have somebody say that as gently as he said it? There are consequences to sin. Sometimes we make decisions in our lives and we repent of them and everything, but there's consequences to it. And so you got the consequence of that you're going to have, the baby's going to die. And the baby did die. The baby's in heaven, we've got to understand. I mean, it's not that the Lord treated that baby wrong. You know, he helped that baby miss a whole bunch of that mess that would have been in his life, but the baby died. And I will never forget that. It's to me, because of the emotional part of dealing with that, has taught me a lesson that just there's always consequences for wrongdoing. And so it's a downward spiral after that. And so last time we studied, we looked at David and his children and spent there's been so many weeks ago, you may not forget all that was involved in it. You remember one of his sons raped his half-sister, and sometimes later another one of David's sons killed the rapist. And you've got all of that's turmoil. Can you imagine having that kind of family problem, that thing going on inside the family? You think you might have problems with your kids, but you've got a rapist, you've got a murderer, you've got all of this that is involved in this. And then lo and behold, that son who thought he had justified and rectified the rape of his sister, then turns against David. And so you get to David and Absalom. If you think it's bad, emotionally bad, for David to have King Saul trying to kill him, for King Saul to lead his army, what about when pretender to the throne, King Absalom? David is still king, but there's an insurrection. He has his army, and David is in danger within his whole life. And I've got down here this thing about the Absalom, David's son, overthrows David. Put that in quotation marks. Then his hairy death. Anybody remember his hairy death? How all that came about? How often did he get a haircut? You remember how often he cut his hair? This is Absalom's hair. Evidently had beautiful hair. He got his hair cut once a year. You know how much hair he grew in a year? The Bible even tells us the weight of it. Now, it depends on which shekel you use. I mean, you can get 25 or 30 pounds. And sometimes I've sat in the barber chair and they're cutting my hair, and I do have a lot of hair that grows real fast. And I think, how much hair would it take to weigh what Absalom's hair weighed? Well, you take the big shekel, and it's 20 or 30 pounds. I don't know how much hair it would take. It'd be like weighing feathers as far as I'm concerned. But there's a smaller shekel, and it weighed between 3 and 4 pounds. That's still a massive amount of hair. Now then, if you'll remember, he used Brill cream and used more than a little dab to do you. And if you're not anciently old, you won't understand what that's all about. But how often did he wash his hair? How much would your hair weigh if you didn't wash it? And I don't know that whether he washed his hair or not. But he's fleeing from Joab, David's general, and fleeing from Joab, he goes from Joab's army, he goes under a tree. His hair gets caught in a branch in the tree. Can you imagine that? The greatest joy of his life now becomes the source of his death. And his hair is caught in the tree, and Joab finally finds where he is and kills him, and that breaks David's heart. And anybody that's ever lost a child, and I've never done that, but you understand the grief that he had. And when David hears about it, David just turns so remorseful, he almost quits being king. Oh, Absalom, Absalom, my son. And you read that, and there's so much emotion in that, we don't have time to do with that. Joab comes to him and straightens us up. But the next point I want to make is, so before we head into some new information, this book shows a man after God's heart dealing with evil. That's what it's all about. How do you deal with trials and troubles in your life? Not just necessarily his evil sin with Bathsheba, but all of the evil people that are around him. It is absolutely amazing. And so in today's lesson, I want to look at David as he returns to the throne, and we'll briefly mention the psalm that is found in this part of 2 Samuel, a list of his mighty men, and hopefully we'll get to these three choices that David had to make. Okay, Absalom is dead. David returns to Jerusalem. And finally, all the tribes support him. There's some controversy, not controversy, but some unrest, because it's the tribe of Judah that rallies around David. They'd rallied around him when he was king for 7 years, and they rally around him again. Well, the 10 northern tribes come and said, don't you dare leave us out. And so now David gets back into Jerusalem and gets back on the throne. I think it is interesting, by the way, in passing, you remember that Absalom took 10 of David's concubines and raped them in the presence of all the people. When David gets back, these concubines, David takes care of them, but he doesn't sleep with them again. I don't even know the significance of that. I just know it's in there, and sometimes you've heard me talk about 3x5 cards. I put that on a 3x5 card and put it in the back of my head. That's just an interesting aspect of that is in the Bible. But there's rebellion, and this is in 2 Samuel chapter 20. We're going to go now to the fact that all the tribes supported him. I want to get to 2 Samuel chapter 20. There is another rebellion. I mean, he's just got back on the throne. There's unrest in relationship to all of these things. And finally, all of the tribes are ready to support David. But all of a sudden, there is another rebellion. And where does that guy come from? Well, he is of the tribe of Benjamin. Anybody know any association between the tribe of Benjamin and being king? Is that a hard question? What tribe was Saul from? And so here's another insurrectionist, and his name is Sheba. And Joab, David's general, takes his army and takes off to get Sheba. Now, David first says, you look early in this chapter, he came, verse 3 is where the virgins are in. But then the king says to Amasa, assemble the men of Judah for me within 3 days and present yourself here. He went to assemble the men of Judah, but he delayed longer than the time which David had set. And David said unto Abishai, now Sheba the son, and here's his genealogy, will do more harm than Absalom's done. I've just got back on the throne, lo and behold, I've just really now solidified the throne. What's the first thing I face? It's another rebellion. Not only did the baby die, the rest of David's life, he was faced with adversity in his life. And we may take some time next week in the concluding lesson of this of 2 Samuel to talk about David's reaction in relationship to all of this. So Amasa goes to assemble, but he delays. And so Joab's men, and verse 7, and all the mighty men went out after him, they pursuing Sheba. And when they get to a large stone, Amasa came before them. Joab was dressed in his battle armor, and on it was a belt with a sword fastened in a sheath at his hip, and he was going forward. It fell out. Joab said to Amasa, are you in health, my brother? How are you doing? Isn't that the sort of common greeting? And he took Amasa by the beard with his right hand to kiss him, and he did not notice the sword that was coming in with his left hand. And so here's this guy, Joab, said, you got to respect the king, got to respect the king. And here's this man given an order to do something in 3 days and didn't do it, so now he's a dead man. And so now Joab takes his army to go to check Sheba. And I read these things and I keep saying, why is this story in the Bible? I just am fascinated all the way through this. Why is this story in the Bible? And I'm not even sure. There are things sometimes I can figure out, well, maybe that's the reason it's here. But I just find this rather amazing. And he continues to pursue Sheba. Joab continues to pursue Sheba. Verse 13 says, Joab and the people went on after Joab to pursue Sheba. They came and they found him, and they cast a siege mound against the city, and were ready to enter in. And all the people were with Joab, battered the walls to throw it down. And a wise woman cried from the city and says to Joab, come near that I may speak to you. So here's this woman, a wise woman in this city, and he says, are you Joab? And he says, I am. And he said, hear the words your maid say. And he said, I'm listening. They used to talk in former times, saying, thou shalt surely seek guidance as able, and so they would end disputes. I'm among the peaceable and the faithful people from this city that was noted for its ability to bring peace, you seek to destroy a city wanting one man. Why are you doing this? And in verse 20, Joab says, far be it from me that I should swallow up and destroy this city. But a man from the mountains of Ephraim, then here's his genealogy, has raised his hand against the king. Deliver him only, and I will depart out of the city. So the next day, guess what happens? The next day, she goes to all the people, and so the next day, they cut off the head of Sheba and threw it over the fence, threw it over the walls of the city. I'm not even sure why that's in the Bible. But isn't that fascinating? I'm not criticizing it for being in the Bible. I'm criticizing myself for not being able to see it's a part of the kinds of life that they've lived. And Joab is pretty tough. He's the one who knew that was David's son Absalom that was caught by his hair, and that David had said, don't you harm my son. And Joab jumps up and kills him. And Joab is a thorn in David's side. He's one of the captains of David's army. He leads it, and he is as oftentimes on the wrong side as he's on the right side, but David treats him right. That's the amazing thing of how David, a man after God's own heart, responds to his enemies. I just find it remarkable. Maybe it's the contrast between David and Joab. I'm not sure all that is involved in this. So the last verse of this chapter says, Joab returned to the king. And then you've got a list in those last three verses of the people that are there. Let's go to the list of the mighty men of David's kings. What chapter is that in? Is that in chapter 21? No, it's not in chapter 21. I've probably got it here. I've got that as chapter 22. That's the psalm is in 2 Samuel 22. Okay, it's in chapter 23. David has these mighty men. In fact, on Tuesday morning at Tuesday morning Bible study, we studied 2 Samuel chapter 23. And those who were there, wasn't it a fascinating study to look at this? And somebody remarked afterwards how much they enjoyed that Tuesday morning class. If you're not doing anything on Tuesday mornings, you need to be there. It's a fascinating kind of study. We go slow and everything. And so we spent time looking at this. But there are three mighty men that are mentioned. And they are three great mighty men. All of a sudden, where's Joab's name? He's not here. And then there are three more mighty men. And I find this interesting. David was in the stronghold and the garrison. This in verse 14, chapter 23, verse 14. David was in the stronghold and the garrison of the Philistines was then in Bethlehem. That's David's hometown. And David said with longing, oh, that someone would give me a drink of water that's in that well in Bethlehem by the gate. You ever wake up need to stop and get coffee or something? Is that what it is? Is it just, but he's there. And he says, they're in Bethlehem. You know what I miss about Bethlehem? That well of water. Isn't that remarkable? And David said, if I just have a sup of water out of that well. And David said with longing, oh, that someone would give me a drink of water from the well of Bethlehem, which is by the gate. So the three mighty men, fight through the entire garrison of the camp of the Philistines. They get water from the well in Bethlehem that was by the gate. They brought it to David. And look at the last part of that verse. David would not drink it. He'd longed for it. These men have risked their life. He refuses it. And he said, far be it from me, O Lord, that I should do this. Is not this the blood of men who went in jeopardy of their lives? The price for this water is too great. It's got the blood of my 3 mighty men. I could have lost every one of them. And yet and he pours the water out on the ground. That's remarkable. In Judaism, there were not only animal sacrifices and grain sacrifice, there was a drink sacrifice, where a drink was held up before God, evidently to signify the drinks that God had, the things that God had given them to drink, and it was poured out as an offering. And when I read this, I see this same kind of thing beginning to happen. And then there are another 3. There is Abishai, who is the brother of Joab, and he was in the second group of 3. So we got top 3, we got 4, 5, and 6. And all that they did, that is so interesting. I preached a sermon here years ago about one of these, and he was the one that well, let's see, what's that? Yes. What's that in verse? Well, yes. Lifted up 3 men, okay. Well, it's a little bit loud. I guess we got to that. Yes. And so you get to these 3, but verse 22 said, These things Benaniah, the son of Jehoiada, did, and won a name among 3 mighty men. He was more honored than the 30, but he did not get in the top 3. And so you got the first 3, you got the second 3, and then you got the 30. And there's a listing, and it's almost like reading the begats. You know, when you read that, do you just skim over it? Don't try to pronounce all those names. That's about the way I skim the Bible, and I get to this until you get to the end verse. There are 30 mighty men of David. Who's the last one? Chapter 23, verse 39, I'm sorry. You get to the last verse. Recognize that name? Yes. How did he die? Who was responsible for his death? And yet he's honored by David as being one of his great men. I find that you're talking about David and his enemies and how to treat other people. The very fact that when you list the top 36 guys in David's army, you rise right up there. You remember how he died? He went back at David's insistence, and when he gets back, they put him in the forefront because he's a great warrior. The army withdraws, and he's left up there, and he's killed. And yet David killed one of his mighty men. It shows you that you can be a man after God's own heart and still struggle to live right. And if you think, well, I'll never be like these, be like that. I wish I could be a man after God's own heart. You know, I've known of 1 or 2 individuals that I put in that category. One of them being my dad, who I've never said a lot about publicly. But I saw in him a man who lived his life, struggled, but he always tried to live right and do right and treat other people right. A man after God's own heart. And it's the spirituality of this man that is really amazing. Chapter 24, last chapter of the book. David's sin in numbering the people. Isn't that amazing? The anger of the Lord, again, isn't that amazing? The baby died. And now the Lord is angry again against David. What'd you do this time? Did you go out and take a man's wife and kill the man? What? Anger of the Lord was aroused against Israel, and he moved David against them to say, go number Israel and Judah. Have you got your phone? Can you look up, if you've got your Google, could you Google right now and find out how many active soldiers there are in the Army, in the Air Force, in the Navy? How big is our military? That's what's happening right here. How strong is my army? Now, 2 Chronicles chapter 21 and verse 1 says that Satan was a part of this. That's interesting because the devil, the word Satan, is only found 3 times in the entirety of the Old Testament. You do not read about the devil being in the Garden of Eden in the book of Genesis. Isn't that amazing? You start studying, he's there. You know he's there, but the word Satan is not, the word devil is not found. Isn't that amazing? You've got to get all the way to the last book of the Bible to find out that that old serpent was the devil. It's in Revelation chapter 12. And so how significant is that? Well, I think it'd be pretty significant. He's in the book of Job, mentioned several times in that first and second chapter of Job that Satan is mentioned. This is one of the few times. David does wrong, and Satan's responsible for it. Not that Satan forces him to do it, but where does sin come from? Every man. Let no man say when he's tempted, I'm tempted of God. But every man is drawn away of his own lusts. And so there are some circumstances, and there may be more of this about Satan being involved in it, but Satan being the avenue through which David sins, and that is, he sins and he goes out and he numbers the people. The king says to Joab, go out there, let's see how strong the army is. And you go from Dan, look in chapter 24, verse 2, from Dan to Beersheba. You know what that is? That's from Maine to Key West. You know, that's from north to south. It's from sea to shining sea. And he says, and count the people that I may know the number of people. And Joab says, may the Lord add to you 100-fold more than there are, and may the eyes of my Lord the king see it. Why does my Lord the king desire this thing? If you look, and I look at this in passing, sometimes we look at the word Lord and point out it's in all capitals. Isn't it amazing? In this verse, whenever he's talking about my Lord the king, it's in lowercase. It's just a common word. And there's a special word, Jehovah, that is sometimes translated Lord, and it's always in all caps. But not here, not in this situation. And so he's talking about, why does my Lord want to do this? Joab says, you're the commander-in-chief. Why do you want to do this? But he goes and he numbers the people. How long does it take to number the people? Look in verse 9. He gave verse 8. They were going throughout all the land. They came to Jerusalem 9 months and 20 days. Gives you some idea of how thorough they were. There were in Israel 800,000 valiant men who drew the sword, and of Judah there were 500,000. That's 1.3 valiant folks in his army. How many folks we got in the U.S. Army? Anybody found that number? Huh? U.S. Army, the number of people in our army. Anybody do that?
The whole military is over 2 million.
I don't want to know just the Army. I want to know each branch separately, okay? Can you do that? Somebody else will look up the Navy, and somebody else will look up the Air Force.
Active duty in Army is 453,000.
400,000. That's pretty good. This great nation has got almost as much as Judah, the southern kingdom, had. Judah, the southern kingdom, had 500,000, and the northern kingdom had twice that number. How many we got? How many Marines do we have? You got that? 172,000 Marines. I think I found a different number for that, but we'll take that number. How many is in the Navy? 300. Your numbers are bigger than mine, but they're still in the ballpark, you know. How many is in the Air Force?
318.
How many?
318,000.
380,000. That's not, okay. The numbers I saw, our army is smaller than Saul's army is. There are 47,000 Marines. Isn't that amazing? You think about what we think about the size of our Marines and the 200,000 in the Navy. You know, that's amazing. And is it the Air Force that has? And I guess it's talking about pilots. I'm not sure what it's talking about. The number I found was 27,000. You have a bigger number for the Air Force?
Air Force total is 318,000.
All right, you've got all the folks on the ground and everything. So I'm talking about active soldiers, and the numbers that I had. We got a military that is smaller than Saul's army. What's wrong with numbering the people? Look what I've done, and look at the size of my army.
You know, we're third in the world.
Third in the world. And we're even smaller than you've got to count every driver of every Jeep to get up to those kinds of numbers. Isn't that amazing? That's amazing how small our army is. That puff you up? There's a danger that we face in relationship to Mission Sunday. It's the same danger, isn't it? Joab's right. God already owns all the silver and gold in the world, and what we give to him is nothing. And Joab says to David, David, it's not you, it's God Almighty. And you will see, and that's the thing that we try to do on Mission Sunday, the emphasis we've given for 25 years, this is what God is doing through us. Give God the glory, give God the glory, give God the glory. It's not how much we give, it's how much God's blessed us with. Okay, that's enough of that. Wish I didn't have to deal with that. And so the Lord comes against David, verse 10, condemns him, saying, David says, I've greatly sinned. Now I pray, Lord, take away the iniquity of your servants. I've done foolishly. So when David arose in the morning, the word of the Lord came to the prophet Gad, David's seer. I don't know where Nathan is, but it's now Gad that is there. And says, David, you have three choices. Because you've sinned, choose one of these. I'm going to punish you. You ever do that to your kids? Shall I do this or do this? That's exactly what God did. Shall you flee, or shall you have 7 years of famine? Where's that come from? 3 years of fleeing, or 3 days of a plague. Pick one, David. And David said, the only hope we have is to try to get God to show mercy to Israel. And he said, let us fall into the hands of the Lord. His mercies are great. Do not let me fall in the hands of man. And so he sent a plague to destroy David, on the people. And he destroyed in that plague 70,000 individuals. You see that? That's in chapter 24, verse 13. And David spoke to the Lord when he saw the angel was striking the people. He said, I have sinned, I've done wicked, but these sheep, what have they done? Let your hand, I pray, be against me and against my father's house. So David goes to offer a sacrifice. This is the last paragraph. He goes to offer a sacrifice. And when he gets down there, he arrives there to build by the threshing floor. That's in verse 21, an altar to the Lord that the plague may be withdrawn. Araunah said to David, "Let my lord the king offer up whatever seems good to him." He says to David, "Here are oxen. Take my oxen and use them for the sacrifice. Here are the threshing floor implements and the yokes that are on the oxen. Use them for wood. O king, he has given these to the king. May the Lord accept it as yours." The king says to Araunah, "No, I will surely buy it from you for a price. Nor will I offer burnt offerings to the Lord my God with that which has cost me nothing." So David bought the threshing floor and the oxen, and with 50 shekels of silver, David built an altar, and the Lord heeded the prayers for the land, and the plagues was withdrawn from Israel. What a lesson about giving. Giving ought to be a sacrifice. And we need to keep that in mind. I could have done it for free. It would have been exactly the same thing if I'd just not bought it or anything. But this is my sacrifice, and I'm going to sacrifice to God. I think that has a real application to our lives in so many ways. Not just sacrifice of money, sacrifice of time. It takes time in your life to be involved in the lives of others. It takes time to be a soul winner. Sacrifice of time. Obviously, the sacrifice of money we'll all give in a little while. I hope what you give will be a reflection of the fact I really appreciate what God's done for me. I'm not going to give to the Lord something that doesn't cost me anything. I'm thankful for the way that everyone gives, and I want you to know I have no knowledge about how much anybody in this church gives. For nearly 44 years, I've kept from learning that. Because when I preach about giving, I don't want to know anybody to think, well, he's talking to me. Giving is something that even the widow did with her 2 mites. But it's far more than, sometimes I heard someone say, giving is different from any other act of worship. I don't think it is. Giving is the fruit of our hands that we've worked for the last week to earn. And we bring and we offer it to God. And we need to see it's a sacrifice of our hands. It's like we offer the sacrifice of our lips and of our songs and praying and that type of thing. Sacrifice of our heart in the Lord's Supper. Giving is the sacrifice of our hands. Isn't it amazing how this book ends? The story, that's the end of it. David's still not dead. He dies in the next book. That's it. Thank you very much.